Right now, as you watch this, there is a simple piece of material sitting on the shelf of nearly every hardware store in America that can drop the temperature of a sweltering room by up to 15 degrees Fahrenheit without using a single watt of electricity. And the truly mind-bending part is that this solution costs about the same as a fast food combo meal, takes less than 10 minutes to install with zero tools required, and works using the exact same physics that NASA engineers rely on to keep satellites from melting in the scorching vacuum of space. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what this material is, precisely how it works, and why almost nobody has bothered to explain this brilliantly simple trick to you before. The solution involves nothing more than a thin sheet of reflective film that you stick to your window glass, yet the science behind why it transforms a blazing hot room into a comfortable space is so powerful that commercial buildings spend thousands of dollars installing industrial versions of this exact same technology. But before we get to the solution, you need to understand the invisible problem that is turning your home into an oven every single summer. A problem that exists in virtually every house and apartment across the United States, but remains completely misunderstood by the people suffering through it. If you live anywhere with hot summers, whether that is Arizona, Texas, Florida, California, or even the Midwest and Northeast during July and August, you have almost certainly experienced the frustration of a room that refuses to cool down no matter what you do. You close the blinds, you crank up the air conditioning, you aim a fan directly at your face, and still the room feels like a furnace. Your electricity bill climbs higher and higher as your AC unit runs nonstop, yet that bedroom, that living room, that upstairs space just will not get comfortable. Energy experts will tell you the problem is your insulation, or your windows are too old, or you need a bigger air conditioning system, or you should install expensive cellular shades or thermal curtains. All of that advice might help, but it also costs anywhere from hundreds to thousands of dollars and still does not address the actual root cause of why that room gets so unbearably hot in the first place. So here is the question that almost nobody asks. What if the overwhelming majority of heat entering your home is not coming through the walls or sneaking in through cracks around the doors? What if it is pouring directly through your windows in a form that is completely invisible to your eyes, but devastatingly effective at cooking your living space? To understand this, we need to go back more than 2 centuries to a discovery that fundamentally changed how scientists understand heat and energy. In the year 1800, a German-born British astronomer named William Herschel was conducting experiments with sunlight in his laboratory in Bath, England. Herschel was trying to determine whether different colors of visible light carried different amounts of heat, so he used a glass prism to split sunlight into a rainbow spectrum and placed thermometers in each colored band. He noticed that temperatures increased progressively from violet through blue, green, yellow, orange, and into red. Then, out of pure scientific curiosity, he placed one more thermometer just beyond the red band, in the dark area where no visible light appeared at all. To his complete astonishment, that thermometer showed the highest temperature reading of all. Herschel had just discovered infrared radiation, an invisible form of electromagnetic energy that carries enormous amounts of heat but cannot be seen by human eyes. This single observation, made with nothing more than a prism and a few thermometers, would eventually reshape our entire understanding of how heat moves through space. And it holds the key to understanding why your south-facing bedroom feels like a blast furnace every afternoon. When sunlight hits your window, you see the visible light streaming in, the bright rays that illuminate your room. But for every bit of visible light passing through that glass, there is an even larger amount of infrared radiation pouring through right alongside it, completely invisible but carrying massive amounts of thermal energy. Standard window glass is essentially transparent to both visible light and near-infrared radiation, which means it does almost nothing to block the heat. The sunlight you can see might account for only 40% of the total solar energy entering your home. The other 60% is invisible infrared radiation that your eyes cannot detect, but your skin absolutely can. This is why closing your curtains or blinds helps somewhat, but never really solves the problem. Those fabric barriers block the visible light, which is why the room gets darker, but most curtains and blinds are relatively transparent to infrared radiation, especially the cheaper ones made from thin synthetic materials. The infrared energy passes right through the fabric, hits your walls, your furniture, your floor, and converts into heat that radiates back into the room air. You have dimmed the room without actually stopping the thermal energy from entering. By the time your air conditioner manages to cool that space down, it has to work against not just the current solar input, but also all the accumulated heat that has been absorbed into the structure of the room itself. Your walls, your ceiling, your floor have become thermal batteries radiating stored heat back into the air for hours after the sun has moved on. This is why rooms that face south or west in the northern hemisphere get unbearably hot in summer, and why that heat lingers well into the evening. Now here is where the story takes a genuinely fascinating turn, because the solution to this exact problem was not developed for houses or apartments at all. It was engineered for one of the most extreme and hostile thermal environments that humans have ever encountered. In the early 1960s, scientists and engineers at NASA were facing a critical challenge with spacecraft and satellite design. A satellite orbiting Earth swings through temperature extremes of more than 500 degrees Fahrenheit, from blistering heat when exposed to direct unfiltered sunlight to freezing cold when passing through the planet's shadow. Traditional insulation materials like fiberglass and foam were far too heavy and bulky to launch into orbit in the quantities needed to handle these conditions. So NASA engineers developed a radically different approach based on reflection rather than absorption. They created multi-layer insulation consisting of incredibly thin sheets of aluminum deposited onto lightweight plastic films like mylar. These reflective layers did not try to absorb or block thermal radiation. Instead, they reflected it back toward its source, bouncing up to 97% of infrared energy away before it could be converted into heat. This elegant technology kept astronauts alive during moon missions, protected sensitive satellite electronics from thermal destruction, and became one of the most important thermal management innovations in the history of space exploration. And here's the extraordinary part. The exact same physics that protects billion-dollar satellites in orbit can be applied to your window using a material that costs $4 at any hardware store. The concept is called low emissivity film, or low E film for short, and it is one of the most effective and absurdly underutilized cooling technologies available to ordinary homeowners and renters. Low E window film is a thin, transparent sheet, typically made from polyester that has been coated with microscopically thin layers of metallic particles, usually silver, zinc, or titanium compounds. When you apply this film to the interior surface of your window glass, it creates a surface that remains transparent to visible light, so you can still see through the window perfectly well, but reflects a large percentage of infrared radiation back outside before it can enter your room and turn into heat. The best films can reject up to 70% of the sun's total solar energy while still allowing 60 to 70% of visible light to pass through, which means your room stays bright and naturally lit, but dramatically cooler. Research published by scientists at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory in California, one of the leading energy research institutions in the United States, has documented that properly installed window films can reduce solar heat gain through glass by 50 to 80%, depending on the film type and the window orientation. In practical terms, that translates to measurable temperature reductions of 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit in rooms with significant window exposure and corresponding reductions in air conditioning energy use of 15 to 30% for those spaces. These are not marginal improvements. These are dramatic, immediately noticeable differences that you can feel the moment you walk into the room. Now, I need to be very clear about something because there is some confusion in the marketplace about different types of window film. There are basically three categories. First, there are blackout films and heavily tinted films that block heat by blocking all light, turning your window essentially into a dark mirror or an opaque barrier. These work for heat reduction, but they also make your room dark and cave-like, which defeats much of the purpose of having a window in the first place. Second, there are decorative films, frosted films, and privacy films that are designed primarily for aesthetics or to obscure the view. Some of these provide minor heat reduction as a side effect, but that is not their primary function. Third, there are spectrally selective low E films, which are specifically engineered to block infrared and ultraviolet radiation while remaining transparent to visible light. This third category is what you want for cooling purposes. These films allow you to maintain your view, keep your room naturally lit, and still achieve massive reductions in heat gain. The technology works because different wavelengths of electromagnetic radiation behave differently when they encounter certain materials. The metallic coating in low E film is engineered at the nanometer scale to be transparent to wavelengths in the visible light spectrum, roughly 400 to 700 nanometers, but highly reflective to wavelengths in the near infrared spectrum, roughly 700 to 2500 nanometers. When sunlight hits the film, the visible component passes through, and you see normally, but the infrared component bounces back outside, carrying its thermal energy away before it can heat your room. It is the same principle as wearing a white shirt versus a black shirt on a sunny day. The white shirt reflects sunlight and stays cooler. The black shirt absorbs it and gets hot. Low E window film is essentially a white shirt for your window, but engineered with such precision that it only reflects the heat-carrying wavelengths while letting the light through. Here is what makes this solution even more compelling for people living in the United States, Canada, the UK, and Australia. It works in reverse during winter. That same reflective coating that bounces infrared radiation outward in summer also reflects infrared radiation inward when your home is warmer than the outside air. During winter, the biggest source of heat loss through windows is infrared radiation escaping from your warm interior to the cold outdoors. Low E film captures that escaping radiation and reflects it back into your room, helping to retain heat and reduce heating costs. So you get year-round energy savings from a single installation. In summer, you stay cooler and use less air conditioning. In winter, you stay warmer and use less heating. This dual benefit is precisely why modern energy-efficient windows come with low E coatings built into the glass at the factory, but those windows cost hundreds of dollars each to purchase and install. A roll of low E film that covers several windows costs about $4 to $8, and you can install it yourself in under 10 minutes per window with no tools other than a spray bottle, a squeegee, and a utility knife. Let me walk you through the actual installation process because it is shockingly simple. You start by cleaning your window glass thoroughly with glass cleaner and a lint-free cloth to remove any dust, dirt, or grease. Then you measure the window and cut the film to size, leaving about an inch of excess on all sides, which you will trim later. Next, you mix a solution of water with a tiny drop of dish soap in a spray bottle and spray the window glass liberally until it is completely wet. You peel the protective backing off the film and spray the adhesive side with the soapy water as well. Then you carefully position the film onto the wet glass. Because the surface is wet and slippery, you can slide the film around to position it perfectly. Once it is aligned, you use a squeegee to push the water and any air bubbles out from under the film, working from the center toward the edges. Finally, you trim the excess film from the edges with a utility knife, and you are done. The whole process for a standard window takes about 8 to 10 minutes, requires zero technical skill, and is completely reversible if you ever need to remove the film. For renters, this is particularly valuable because it requires no permanent modification to the property. The film adheres to glass with a light static cling or a water-activated adhesive that peels off cleanly without leaving residue or damaging the window. When you move, you can either leave it as an improvement for the next tenant or peel it off and take it with you. There is no drilling, no screws, no brackets, nothing that violates a lease agreement. And unlike heavy curtains or exterior shades, window film does not obstruct your view or make your space feel closed in. You still get natural daylight, you can still see outside, but the oppressive heat is dramatically reduced. One of the most common questions people ask is whether window film will make their room too dark. The answer depends entirely on which product you choose. Cheap tinted films and mirror films absolutely will darken your room, sometimes severely. But quality spectrally selective low E films are specifically designed to maximize visible light transmission while blocking infrared. The technical specification to look for is called visible light transmission, or VLT, expressed as a percentage. A film with 70% VLT allows 70% of visible light through, which is bright enough for most applications and barely noticeable. Films with 50 to 60% VLT provide even more heat rejection but create a slight tint, similar to wearing light sunglasses indoors. For most residential applications, a film with 65 to 75% VLT offers the best balance of heat reduction and natural light. Here is something that genuinely fascinates me. This technology has been commercially available and proven effective for more than 30 years, yet the vast majority of homeowners and renters have never even heard of it. If you walk into a Home Depot, a Lowe's, or any hardware store in the United States, you will find window film in the home improvement section, usually on the same aisle as weather stripping and caulk. But it sits there largely ignored, while people spend hundreds of dollars on portable air conditioners, expensive blackout curtains, and higher electricity bills. Why is this technology not being aggressively promoted by energy efficiency programs and utility companies? The answer, as usual, comes down to economics and awareness. Utility companies make money selling electricity, so they have no incentive to promote a $4 solution that cuts your cooling costs by 20%. Energy efficiency rebate programs tend to focus on big-ticket items like HVAC replacements and insulation upgrades because those create jobs for contractors and generate ongoing business. A do-it-yourself window film installation does not require a professional, does not generate recurring revenue for anyone, and does not involve any ongoing service contracts. Additionally, the window film industry itself is relatively fragmented. There are professional installation companies that charge several $100s per window to install high-end architectural films, and there are consumer-grade products you can buy off the shelf for a few dollars. The professional installers do not advertise the cheap DIY option because it competes with their business, and the manufacturers of consumer-grade film do not have massive marketing budgets to compete with major appliance brands. So the technology remains weirdly obscure despite being one of the most cost-effective cooling solutions ever developed. But here is the evidence that this actually works. The United States Department of Energy has published extensive technical documentation confirming that window films can reduce cooling energy use by 7 to 15% for whole house applications and by much more for individual sun-drenched rooms. The Florida Solar Energy Center, one of the leading research institutions studying solar heat gain in hot climates, has tested dozens of window film products and consistently found significant reductions in transmitted solar energy. In Australia, where intense summer heat is a serious issue, window tinning and low E film have become standard practice in both residential and commercial buildings, with government energy agencies actively recommending it as a cost-effective cooling strategy. Let me give you a concrete real-world example. Imagine you have a bedroom with a large west-facing window. Every afternoon from about 3 until sunset, the sun pours directly through that window and the room becomes unbearably hot. Your air conditioner runs constantly trying to keep up, but the room stays stuffy and uncomfortable. You could install blackout curtains, but then the room is dark and depressing. You could buy a portable AC unit for that room, but that costs $200 to $300 plus the electricity to run it. Or you could spend $8 on a roll of low-E window film, spend 10 minutes installing it, and immediately cut the solar heat gain through that window by 60 to 70%. The room stays naturally lit, you can still see outside, but the oppressive afternoon heat is gone. Your central air conditioner no longer has to fight against that massive thermal load, so it runs less, uses less electricity, and actually keeps the whole house cooler. Over the course of a single summer, that $8 film could easily save you $50 to $100 in reduced cooling costs, and it will continue saving you money every single summer for years to come. The typical lifespan of quality window film is 5 to 10 years depending on sun exposure and climate conditions, which means even a conservative estimate of savings delivers a return on investment of several 100%. And we have not even talked yet about the secondary benefits. Low-E window film also blocks up to 99% of ultraviolet radiation, the UV rays that cause furniture, carpets, and curtains to fade over time. If you have ever noticed how fabric near a sunny window bleaches out and loses color, that is UV damage. By blocking UV, window film extends the life of your furnishings and preserves their appearance. It also reduces glare, making it easier to watch television or work on a computer in a bright room without squinting or struggling with reflections on your screen. Some films even add a layer of shatter resistance, holding glass fragments together if the window breaks, which provides a modest security benefit. Now let us talk about what you should actually do right now to start cooling your hottest rooms before the next heat wave hits. First, identify which windows in your home receive the most direct sunlight during the hottest part of the day. In the northern hemisphere, south and west facing windows are usually the biggest culprits. East facing windows get morning sun, which is less intense, and north facing windows get minimal direct sun. Focus your efforts on the south and west exposures first, because that is where you will see the biggest impact. Second, go to Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware, or search online for spectrally selective low-E window film or heat control window film. Look for products with a visible light transmission of at least 60% and a solar heat gain coefficient, or SHGC, of 0.4 or lower. The lower the SHGC number, the more heat the film blocks. Third, measure your windows and buy enough film to cover them with a little extra for mistakes. Most films are sold in rolls of various widths and lengths, typically costing between $4 and $12 per roll depending on size and quality. Fourth, follow the installation instructions I described earlier. Clean the glass, cut the film, wet the glass with soapy water, apply the film, squeegee out the bubbles, and trim the edges. Take your time and do not rush. Even a first-time installer can achieve professional-looking results with a little patience. Fifth, after installation, leave the film alone for a few days to fully cure and adhere. You might notice some small water bubbles or haze initially, but these will disappear as the film dries and bonds to the glass. Finally, pay attention to how the room feels over the next few days and weeks. Most people report an immediate noticeable difference in comfort, especially during the afternoon hours when sun exposure is strongest. Check your thermostat settings and see if you can raise the temperature set point by a degree or two without sacrificing comfort, which translates directly into lower electricity bills. If you are skeptical, and honestly you should be skeptical of anything that sounds too good to be true, start with just one window. Pick your hottest, most unbearable room and apply film to that single window as a test. It will cost you less than $10 and 15 minutes of your time. If it works, and the physics strongly suggests it will, you can expand to other windows. If it does not make a noticeable difference, you are out $10 and you learned something. But I would bet money that once you experience the difference in that first room, you will be ordering more film for every sun-facing window in your house. There is something genuinely empowering about discovering that a problem you have suffered through for years, a problem you thought required expensive professional solutions, can actually be solved with a $4 material and 10 minutes of effort. We live in an age where space-age technology, developed for billion-dollar satellites, is now available at your local hardware store for the price of a burger and fries. The same reflective principles that keep spacecraft from melting in orbit can keep your bedroom cool and comfortable all summer long. Yet millions of people continue to suffer through sweltering rooms, sky-high electricity bills, and the constant frustration of air conditioners that cannot keep up, simply because nobody has bothered to explain this brilliantly simple solution. At Hidden Harvest, this is exactly the kind of overlooked, underutilized, scientifically proven solution that we exist to uncover. I am John A.G., and my mission is to dig into the science, the history, and the practical applications of technologies that can make a real measurable difference in your life without requiring a fortune or a contractor. The power to cool your hottest room is sitting on a shelf right now waiting for you. It is time to stop suffering through the heat and start using the same physics that NASA relies on to protect equipment worth billions. $4, 10 minutes, and your hottest room becomes your coolest room. That is not a theory. That is physics you can feel.